All right, back with you on the Newsfeed PM. Already mentioned South Africa's government of national unity seemingly facing a collapse. This after DA ministers voted against the fiscal framework in Parliament. The fiscal framework passed by a slim margin, 194 to 182, and it would appear that the cracks have begun showing. Senior ANC leaders have slammed the DA's defiance, warning the GNU can't survive if partners oppose fiscal matters. To help us unpack all of this, we're joined now by political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi. Prof, good to have you. You're one of those analysts who had expressed hope in the GNU that certainly the coming together of these parties would make things work. However, there seems to have been failure to strike what John Steenhuisen calls a balance in the sharing of power. Is the ANC to blame here for cutting out the DA?
Hi, good afternoon, Tavon. Good afternoon to your viewers. I still hold that positive view, and one of the main reasons for that is that we need to understand that democracy in itself comes with risk. And one of the main risks of democracy is exactly what is playing out in South Africa today, where we see it seems as if the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, which, in my view, are the main, the primary actors within the government of national unity, can't seems to find common ground. But that is democracy in action. And the question is, can our leaders put aside their own individual party ideologies and focus on the interests of South Africa? I think that for me is the bone of contention. And it seems as if we haven't yet reached that ground. But it's understandably so. Democratic Alliance come from a completely different point of view, which had been peddled in the public domain and which most of us understand, completely different than the African National Congress. And from time to time, we will definitely see some of these differences, and it all depends how they handle that. But I don't think it will, at the end, be good either for the Democratic Alliance and the ANC should these squabbles continue if they can't find the common ground behind closed doors.
The bone of contention which they're failing to reach consensus on, it seems, is the fact that the DA historically has never believed that the ANC policies are for economic growth. And therefore, their understanding of coming into the GNU is that they will be able to reverse those policies. They are not a continuation of the sixth administration, as John Steenhuisen puts it. The ANC, on the other hand, says, well, you cannot come and negotiate fiscal matters based on past policies that have already gone through the National Assembly. They've gone through the process. We voted on these things. These things have been passed. NHI, Bella, and Expropriation Act, and so on and so forth. Saying those things cannot be reversed, and therefore they cannot be used as a bargaining tool for this negotiation of the budget.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for anybody outside of the African National Congress to be able to buy into that, because once you become part of the government, obviously you would want to dictate terms, you would want to influence that. But I don't think in the South African, and it's not only something that applies to the African National Congress, I think in any other context that perhaps would have applied. Too much is at risk for the African National Congress. Also in the public domain, to be seen to be almost, succumbing to the pressure coming from the Democratic Alliance. And all these, as I've indicated, for me, it's more about those political squabbles. It's not good for South Africans. It's not good for the man in the street, because at the end of the day, when the focus has to be at service delivery, which is at an all-time low, you just don't have to drive through any, or just have to drive through any small town, city to see what is happening in terms of service delivery. the physical effect of lack of governance. That is playing out, and most South Africans are exposed to that. And yet we do have leaders who can change that particular situation, who are now at each other's throat. But fact of the matter is, it's going to be very difficult, because remember, at the end of the day, you are still, if you're a party leader, if you're leading a party, at the end of the day, you are still responsible and actually under obligation to respect to technically the parties, or toe the party's line. And that for me is the bone of contention, which is going to be very difficult for these two parties to reach consensus very soon. And I believe that this situation will continue, but my take is that I can't see that the DA will easily just withdraw from the GNU, because some of their leaders has now tasted the fruits of democracy, and that is access to power. And some of them have been doing quite well. I mean, the Minister of Home Affairs. And the question is, will the DA just easily relinquish what they've started to build, not only for those particular ministries, but also to enhance the image of the party going forward?
Is the IFP going to be the voice of reason here? It seems John Steenhuisen believes that they can continue engaging with parties within the GNU, particularly the IFP, because of the relationship that they have provincially in KwaZulu-Natal, where they are the kingmakers, I suppose, that have ensured that the IFP runs that particular province.
Yeah, unfortunately, I would have to use a certain degree of caution in responding to that particular question, because my take is political leaders are never to be trusted. It all depends on what they can take out of the situations, what they can benefit out of the negotiations. And I mean, an Action SA, that's the previous, a couple of months down the line, wanted to do nothing with the government of even with the African National Congress. And suddenly they've changed tune. And the question is, what happened behind the scenes? And that is the nature of our politics. And very briefly, if I can just give you a very picture, go and look who are serving in your community police forums, your school governing forums. These are all former leaders, local leaders. They are eroding the confidence in our institutions. And this is exactly how our politicians are acting. They are transactional activists, where it all depends on whether the negotiations will suit them personally and their organizations, and not the interests of South Africans. And that's why I will be very cautious to say whether the IFP will in future perhaps toe and support the Democratic Alliance. But yet, I strongly believe that they have shown at least some consistency in the way and the manner they have dealt with issues. When the IFP have taken a decision about their support, they have went through that in the past, and I strongly believe that if the Democratic Alliance can reach out to them, perhaps they may find common ground. But whether that will be enough to convince the African National Congress, that will be something else.
Now, if they can rely on other political parties within the GNU to bring the ANC into some kind of agreement of power sharing, can they rely on the other tools, which I believe John Steenhuisen is trying to pull on, the markets? They've got a letter from business, for example, the international relations tool. Can they pull on those tools at least to get the ANC to toe the line?
Yeah, to a certain extent, we've already, and that is quite commendable, when, big business in South Africa also wants these two parties to see the light, to see the implications of these public squabbles, because we are under tremendous pressure currently with some of the decisions, the policy directions that have been taken by the Trump government. So you would want to have a government of national unity where the Democratic Alliance is part of it, as it is currently. And I strongly believe that big business has a role to play in terms terms of influencing policy. But there will also come a time that will you be accountable to the markets at the expense of losing your electoral support? And I think those are some of the issues that will perhaps play a counter the implications to what a party like the African National Congress and even the Democratic Alliance would want to decide upon, because at the end of the day, they are political parties that would want to have an outright majority, perhaps not during the local government election, but at least during the next provincial and national elections.
At what point, and is there an appetite within the ANC to play their final card? And their final card, of course, is what the DA fears the most. Go to the parties on the left, go to MK Party, go to the EFF and form that GNU.
Yeah, well, it will be very interesting to see what any sort of coalition between the African National Congress and the MK Party. Let us forget about the EFF, because there is a slight possibility that in future perhaps the ANC can work together with the EFF, although even if it's on a issue-to-issue basis. But that will be very interesting, especially if you take into consideration the history and the origin of the MK Party with all these public spats against the African National Congress. To what extent will these antagonize their own supporters on both, extremes? That will be very interesting. And will that actually bode well for the markets? And these are some of the issues that we will have to at least point out. But in South African politics, never say never.
Prof, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for your analysis this afternoon. Professor Sethulego Matebesi there on the ongoings within the government of national unity.